Every franchise has their own terminology, and Pokémon is no exception. The name Pokémon itself is a great start. Being a shortened version of the name Pocket Monsters, Pokémon not only is the series name, but is also what every creature is called. A very strong use of it in my opinion, as it leads you to always think of one when you're talking about the other. Speaking on the Pokémon themselves, you could probably classify all of them as different terms, and that is just a measly 1,000 plus right there. Now, like with many great franchises, Pokémon not only has the official terminology, but also a lot of fan-made terms. This video is just going to be a little mix talking about some terms from both the real side and the fan side. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, but these are at least what I find to be some of the more interesting cases. Starting off with a simple one, we have the regional terms associated with the regional forms. In the 7th generation, we were introduced to the Alolan Pokémon. These are new forms of older Pokémon that are region dependent. This trend continues with every new region we get, granting us Galarian, Hisuian, and Paldean forms. These alone are interesting in their own right, but what we know as the original forms of these Pokémon can also get this treatment. The games reference the original forms of Meowth, Diglett, and Mr. Mime all as Cantonian. This allows for a very simple line of logic. The original forms can have a regional indicator, chosen by the game/region it first debuted in, making way for the terms such as Jotonian, Hoennian, Sinnohian, Unnovan, and Colossian. These terms may not be official, but follow the rules set by the official ones and will work until we get official ones, if we ever do. And by following the naming conventions already set, once we get official terms, it's possible they won't be all that different from the ones we already know. Shiny Pokémon are differently colored Pokémon, and they used to be called something different. When first introduced in Gen 2, the debug menu referred to them simply as Rare Pokémon, Stadium 2 changes it to be Colored Pokémon, and then the Gen 3 debug menu refers to them as Alt Color Pokémon. The TCG has their own list of names for them, such as Shining or adding a gold star to the Pokémon's name. The specific term Shiny, however, wasn't anywhere official, as it started as a fan term. The fan base came up with this term to describe them, and it stuck, so much to the point that in Generation 4, Pokémon itself adopted the term. This is a very big moment. Something even as small as a simple word to describe a rare occurrence had become a proper official part of the ever-growing glossary of Pokémon. While Shiny went from a fan term to an official one, some other terms were not as lucky. Pseudo-legendary was a term used to describe a very select group of Pokémon that all followed a very certain criteria. A Pokémon that has a 3-stage evolution line, has a base stat total of 600, and are in the slow EXP group. These are very powerful Pokémon, hence why they are given such a powerful name. However, it doesn't really stick when it comes to official matters. Pokémon have released 2 merchandise collections featuring these Pokémon. The first was called Late Bloomers, and the second and most recent one refers to them as the Powerhouse Pokémon. That's not all for Powerhouse either, as a Raid and Outbreak event for Scarlet and Violet also used the term Powerhouse to describe these Pokémon, pointing into the direction that this may be the new official name for these Pokémon. This change is a big shakeup, and people may not like it. I myself will probably still refer to them as pseudo-legendaries, as that's a term I've been using for such a long time. I, however, can understand them not adopting the term pseudo-legendary. The name having pseudo, which implies that these are fake legendaries, highlights really what they aren't, whereas Powerhouse highlights what they are. Also, using the term legendary when describing a non-legendary could be confusing to some, as well as pseudo being an inspiration for the name Pseudo-Wudo, where they, to be fair to them, would have to include it in the subsection if it were to become an official term. Before moving on, I feel it is important to note that pseudo-legendary wasn't a universal term for this group, as there is also the name the 600 Club, which refers to all non-legendary Pokémon with a base stat total of 600, which covers all the Pokémon included under the pseudo umbrella, but also includes Archaludon, which doesn't fit the qualifications for the pseudo-legendary classification. Speaking on hard-to-accept name changes, we come to starter Pokémon. Starter Pokémon are your first Pokémon, the Pokémon you start with. Such a simple and straightforward term. While starter Pokémon, or starters for short, was used sparsely, it was still used in both games and the anime. However, around the Generation 6 and 7 era of Pokémon, they decided to phase out the term starter and start to replace it with first partner Pokémon. It was subtle at first. Like, my first big encounter with it being was from the Jumbo starter cards they released to celebrate the 25th anniversary. The term has received quite a mixed reception. A starter was used for such a long time and is far simpler than first partner, and it gets the exact same sentiment across. Unlike with the change to pseudo-legendaries, I understand this change far less, and I still find myself rarely ever using the new term. The many groupings of legendary Pokémon all have terms associated with them, whether it be a duo, trio, or more. Some of these terms are official, and some are just fan terms, but there's a lot to keep up with the different classifications. The legendary beasts are a prime example of a fan name getting replaced, and not being a heated topic due to the new name. Originally, people referred to these Pokemon as the legendary dogs, a very weird name for them given that all three of them are very obviously cats. I'm not really sure why dogs was chosen in the first place, nor why it stuck around so long, but legendary beast is just such a better name. I remember the first time I heard beast used and just immediately knew it was a far better name than calling them dogs. The Reggies, formerly referred to as the Reggie Trio, is a group of legendaries that keeps expanding, currently having a whopping 6 of them right now. Given that they all start with Reggie, many people refer to them simply as just the Reggies. And sometimes they were called the legendary golems, due to their similarities to golems in real life. Understandable why this one isn't used a whole lot, given the existence of Golem the Pokémon. In Sword and Shield, these Pokemon were referred to as the legendary giants, and they have also been referred to as the legendary titans in the past. Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza are known in the games as the super ancient Pokemon. In the real world, many people, however, refer to them as the Weather Trio, given that their abilities quite literally control the weather. Super ancient is an interesting term to use, in my opinion, as it feels kinda ambiguous when the series also has Pokemon you have to revive from fossils, and you can also get Arceus, which, being the creator of the Pokemon universe, is probably the oldest Pokemon around. The Swords of Justice, legendary trio from Unova, or a quartet if you include the mythical Keldeo, have the very fun fan name of the legendary Musketeers, as the 4 Pokemon are vaguely based on the tales of the 3 Musketeers. There's not much else for this point, I just like this little tidbit. There's more for the legendaries out there. These are just the more fun bits to go on about. I could talk about exclusively the names of the legendary groups, but that would start to draw on as I talk about stuff like the legendary birds, which are just a trio of legendary birds. Moving on, we can talk about ecologically similar Pokemon, which is a big name. Some fans refer to them as the much simpler, convergent Pokemon. These are Pokemon that are similar to other Pokemon, such as Diglett and Wiglet, or Tentacool and Toedscool. This was a concept introduced in Gen 9, and are pretty similar to regional forms. However, they are technically different Pokemon still. The last bit I'm going to talk about today is some of the many abbreviations that the series has. There's a lot that serve well in shortened form, like hit points being shortened to HP, power points to PP, and experience to EXP. But there's also some more fun ones like Stab, which stands for same type attack bonus, which basically means if you use an attack the same type as your Pokemon, it does extra damage. The Pokemon have quite a few related to themselves, such as OT, which stands for Original Trainer, a tag given to the Pokemon you caught, Trainer ID, which is the Trainer ID number, as well as the SID, which is the Hidden Secret ID number. There's even some in relation to moves, such as TMs, the technical machines that teach moves, TRs, which are technical records, which are like a single-use TM item found in the Sword and Shield games. And then there's HMs, the hidden machines, which were special moves that had out-of-battle effects. There's BP, which depending on the game you're currently playing, could be either battle points or blueberry points, both of which are an additional currency harder to get than the normal one. Speaking of, the main currency of the Pokemon franchise is the Pokemon Dollar, or the Poké Dollar. It's a rarely used name that shows up here and there, as the currency is usually referred to as just money, or by the special currency sign, a P with a double strike through. Alright, that's most of the super interesting stuff that's worth talking about, at least in my opinion. There's an astronomical amount of terms you can find for this franchise, both official and fan-made, and it just shows the level of immersion the series can bring at times. If you made it this far, I would like to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or maybe even subscribe, as doing so truly does help out the channel. I would also love to hear from you in the comments down below, even if it's just what your favorite term from any corner of the franchise. If you want to further support this channel, consider becoming a member. Doing so grants you perks like having your name up here on the screen right about now in future videos. With all that said, this has been Big Blast 99, and I hope you all have yourselves a goddamn good one.